What's happening, Hardscapers? This is episode 267 of the How to Hardscape podcast, where we talk about how you can start and grow your hardscaping business. And on today's episode, we're joined by returning guest, George Urvari. He is the co-owner of Oriole Landscaping, that he is completely hands-off with his partner on that business at the moment, and co-founder and senior consultant at Knowledge Tree Consulting. And they actually have an event coming up that I will actually be at as well, and this is in Elmira, north of Kitchener. If you are interested in going, I do have a very limited amount of tickets at 40% off their ticket price there. If you are interested, send me a message on Instagram at How to Hardscape, and I'll get you that promo code. I'm not going to share it here just because I do have such a limited amount to give away with that. So if this is something that you are in the area, you're interested in going, I would highly suggest that you take a look at the event. The link will be in the show notes. This is going to be called the Smart Growth event, presented by Knowledge Tree Consulting and Earthscape. So it's actually going to be at Earthscapes facility. And just going off the agenda here, there's going to be coffee and snacks in the morning, introductions, overview, goals at the beginning of the day, the discussion about Earthscape, the journey, past, present, future. There's a facility tour, there's a lunch and networking, and then I talk about buying and selling businesses, employee share ownership plans, ESOPs. We've had a podcast on those before. And then finally, closing remarks, questions, and then an optional networking dinner at the end of the day there. So a very packed schedule. And if you're interested in that, and like I said, you're around the Kitchener area upwards towards Elmira, this event is going to be August 15th, and I do have a limited amount of discount codes to give away for that event. And like I said, I'm going to be there. I'm going to try to get some short podcast episodes in. And if you've already registered and signed up, I'd love to know that you're going, and shoot me a message also at How to Hardscape, and I'd love to also see you there. But with George on this episode, we get into that smart growth. What is smart growth in his opinion, and a lot of wide-ranging topics that we also get into on this podcast. Anytime I talk to George, sit down with him, there is more questions that come out of that discussion than I actually came in with, which in my opinion is a good problem to have when you are talking to someone as somebody who has been in the industry for as long as George has, and has grown a business to a point where he's completely hands off. So I do love to sit down and talk to George as many times as I possibly can, and this is just one of those discussions that we've had here on this podcast. I believe this is the third one as well. And before we get into today's episode, we want to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. If you're looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And if you're looking for a software to get into this season, the How to Hardscape Headquarters software can help you budget, estimate job costs, schedule, time track, manage your employees, and so much more, including our courses that you can use to train and onboard your employees. So if you want to learn more about that, send me a message at How to Hardscape on Instagram. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Today we're joined by a three-time returning guest, George Urvari. George, I asked you last time about your last name, and I think I got it there correctly without even having to ask you this time. He is the co-founder, Oriole Landscaping, and senior consultant at Knowledge Tree Consulting, also the founder there as well. George, thank you so much for joining us here again.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Awesome opportunity.
And this is the third time that you've been on the podcast now. And I told you after the last podcast that the more I talk to you, the more questions that I have for you. So thank you so much for taking another hour out of your day to kind of dive deeper into, I'm sure, the questions that I have for you, but also a topic that you've kind of brought to me here, the recession's operations opportunity. And very topical, because a lot more I'm getting messages from people saying, what are you doing to get leads? What are you doing to, like, there's a dry up of leads. It seems to be that we're coming into this time. So a very good way to things that we can touch on here. George, let's get started here talking about the economy. what have you kind of noticed? Tell me about the economy and what you've kind of noticed here.
I have some inside information because I deal with some big wigs and that have data and statistics, and without naming companies or people, essentially the companies that actually handle transactions like credit card transactions, they have all the data on which way the trends are shifting in terms of people spending. So, for example, people are spending way less on discretionary items like restaurants, things like that, and are spending more at the grocery store, which is a shift in behavior. Now, the same amount of money is being spent differently. And so, we had the luxury of having this sort of boom after COVID with, well, I can't do anything, so I might as well fix my backyard. And so that's now shifted, and of course we had a boom. So your measure of relativity, like what should it look like compared to what's it now? We were spoiled for a couple of years where you could treat your customers poorly, you could, not show up, whatever it was, it didn't matter. You could come up with an excuse. I couldn't get the lumber. That's not the case anymore. And so we've come back to reality, and everybody who is not optimized in their business is going to find it harder because the ones that are more prepared. And so from the economic perspective, there's a number of things that are going on. Real estate is essentially flatlined, and so people can't sell their property, so the property values are going down. So now they feel poorer. And when you lower your price, before it was a bidding war going up, now it's a bidding war going down. So if we have a similar home and you sold yours for 1.5 million, and then I sell mine for 1.3 million, that sets the floor for everybody else. So now the prices drop. And then, if the people are desperate to sell, in other words, they have to sell, some people don't have to sell, some people have to sell, might be moving to another job somewhere. It may be that they need to pay some bills or whatever the case may be. So we're having a reversal of what was happening, which seemed like, the roller coaster going up, up, up. Now we're at the top of the tracks and it's going to go down. So the real estate market's tough. The auto market's tough. There was, we were waiting for vehicles. You're overpaying for everything. Now there's surplus vehicles on the lot. So all these things are creating these pressures. The good news is when they talk about recession, that's not necessarily everything's the same. So for example, let's say you lived in Texas, people are moving to Texas, they don't have that problem. If you're in Florida, people are moving out of Florida, that's a bit of a problem. And then we have the institutional piece, which is all these giant companies that bought real estate in the corporate real estate market, and everybody's working from home. So if you think of like what's going on, it's a giant transformation. Then we throw AI into the mix, which is also causing all kinds of disruptions. Right now, I think it's more additive. In other words, just it's not really, people aren't quite losing their jobs yet, but that may happen as well. And so there's a lot of things moving on. We got a couple of wars going on, which doesn't help matters. Fortunately, in the U.S. has its own oil, so it doesn't matter really from a supply side. If there's no oil, the U.S. just has the shale oil that they can draw from, so they're in good shape. The governments are spending like crazy, and then we have the Biden-Trump dilemma. So that's in a nutshell what's going on in the economy. It's it's a dog's breakfast, I think. And the trick is that someone will always survive when things go down. The question is who and how do you make sure that you survive the turmoil. So, if you get to the other side, it's great. As a matter of fact, uh, there's tons of opportunities. So the topic was recessions, operations, and opportunity. And so I've sort of talked about what a recession is. It doesn't affect everybody the same way. Some people actually do better in recessions, but a lot of people suffer. And the landscaper usually is somebody that, people don't need to spend money on. It's not like you need to have landscaping. And so we're going to feel a bit of a slowdown in our industry for sure.
You've been through recessions before in the past. Um, do recessions typically follow the same type of trend? Are they different from one to the other? In your experience with recessions, what did you feel? How long did you feel it for? And what did it look like on the other side?
So the first was in the 80s, the late 80s, 88, 89, 87, 89. We were too young and too stupid to know, and we just worked harder and worked for less and survived it. Then we had one in 2000, and that was interesting because all of a sudden people delayed making decisions. So the first thing is they had the money, but psychologically, that like I'm not going to get my bonus. And a lot of very successful, wealthy people defer their gratification. So even though they could do it, they won't do it. The marginal market where people are borrowing to do things, those people shut down right away because it's an existential threat. And this is where relationships come in. If you've got somebody who you've had a great relationship with, there's a much higher likelihood of them pursuing a deal with you than if they don't know you. And so what we found was those existing clients that we've had over the years are what saved us essentially. Because they have the money, they trust you, and it's not transactional. So on the sales side, always take care of good people. It's one of the golden rules that we have is take care of those good people because they're going to take care of you. And and then 2008 was a bit of a disaster, but we got lucky. Like we literally had no work, and we ended up getting two jobs, one for a gold miner and a copper miner. And of all the things that went up in that recession, commodities went up like gold and copper. So we had some giant projects. So it was actually luck that got us through that one. And now COVID was terrifying as well for a little bit there. We didn't know what was going to happen, but then the government threw money at the problem. So they're all a little bit different. One thing that's constant is the psychology of the buyer. Am I going to hold on to my cash? Am I going to save? Am I going to buy? Or am I going to actually, if I've got cash, negotiate you to death to get the best deal possible? And so that becomes tough because now you don't have work and people are beating you down. So that's tough, 100% tough.
Going into COVID, I'm sure the obvious thing to do is to say this isn't going to last forever. What can we do to prepare ourselves coming out of this when things do revert back to normal? And it seems to be like there's a big pullback, but it might just be back to normal. Or the worst side of that is that out of COVID, we get into a recession, which is a possibility. Um, did you do you in your thought process on this, do you look at something like, okay, we're in this big boom, let's prepare ourselves coming out of this boom? Or does it not even make sense to kind of time the market like that to be able to prepare yourself? Just kind of go with the flow and adjust as necessary depending on the demand, if that question even makes sense for you.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to get to that. One last factor is the stock market.
Okay.
So right now the stock market's at all-time highs there's maybe 7 companies that are holding the market at all-time highs. So there's still people that are feeling confident because of the stock market, despite all the other gloom and doom. And so hopefully that leg doesn't fall. And so then back to your question is, so I'm a big believer in being proactive. Most people are reactive. So reactive behavior is tactical, proactive behavior is strategic. And so the second leg of the stool is recession to operations. Well, in the operations realm, essentially I want to be lean. I don't want to have too much equipment. I don't want to have stuff lying around. The amount of money that people have tied up in their operations that's not being fully utilized is crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So I always try to find money in the business before I even work on anything else. Like, what can we sell? What can we get rid of? What can we rent out? What can we do to leverage the existing infrastructure that we have? And most people neglect that. And I think that's the biggest opportunity with the least hassle is streamlining your equipment. So, guess what? You love that piece of equipment, it's paid for, but it's not making you money, it's depreciating actually. And you could rent something for $10,000 and it would be less than the depreciation. and you'd be further ahead. But most people don't see that. They just hold on to their stuff, or their equipment is falling apart and in disrepair and causing all kinds of headaches, and they hold on to it because it's paid for. So, obviously the leaner your business is, the more competitive you can be. And also we just bought a business called the Cultivated Gardener. So I can actually put it out there. And we liquefied our assets and turned it into cash. So we could actually buy a business. And so, if we didn't have that cash, we'd have to borrow money to do it, which is not great. So we had the cash to buy this business that's positive cash flow. It's a maintenance business. It's actually high-end horticulture with, recurring revenue. Clients sign up every single year. There's an opportunity because we weren't asset heavy on our balance sheet. And sometimes in a recession, the hard thing to do is to sell assets because nobody wants to buy them. So, being lean in your operations, it doesn't matter. The best time to start was 20 years ago. Get lean. So today, tomorrow, get on it right away, and leverage that balance sheet that you have, which is either going to be cash or some asset. Now, if the asset's producing for you beautifully and it's not breaking down, fantastic. But otherwise, it's got to go. And it's like a museum. A lot of people yards are museums. So, or they have duplicates or redundancies or things that don't work properly. So I think the opportunity to clean up your balance sheet with respect to your operations is the first place that I would look for money. And on the opportunity side, I guess, sales are a big opportunity. So we bought a business, and there's going to be all kinds of other businesses to buy. There's going to be amazing talent on the market. There's small businesses that can't hold up. And, our goal is just to get through the recession. It's not about if we can make money, great, but I'm not really interested in that. I'm actually interested in leaning up and improving through the recession. So for me, it's an opportunity. And, we obviously have to provide great value to our clients. And so when you're carrying all this extra stuff, someone's got to pay for it. And it's usually you and the client. So ideally, the client saves money, you become more competitive. So these recessions are actually huge opportunities for a lot of companies. Like, great companies love recessions. And the way to look at it is, let's say you were doing amazing because it's a boom, and then there's a recession and you do okay, but you actually come out stronger for it on the other side. Then all of a sudden you kill it again. So, if you graph improvement, it's not necessarily a linear 45-degree line going up. Sometimes you level off. You might even go down a bit, and then you boom up again. And so I think there's huge opportunities in these recessions, and inevitably they end, and patterns of behavior change. I'm a big believer in also marketing yourself or positioning yourself as the best, because people buy quality in times of distress, and you don't want to take a chance with somebody who's having cash flow problems to do your landscaping and hope that they finish the job. So there's a whole bunch of psychological factors that go into that. And so I think it's very important that that lean mindset, and if you can get out of this, on the other side, you'll be way stronger. And hopefully you don't go back to your bad habits again. Here's an example. So I see people buying, the most expensive fully loaded pickup truck. Why? It doesn't make you money. It depreciates like no tomorrow. It gets you from A to B. It really doesn't do anything else. I mean, I don't know, maybe you don't get a rash on your butt from sitting on that leather seat, whatever it is, but it's just money that's gone. And you could take that savings, say it's $20,000, and put it into a GIC or a bond or something. And, you're going to make $1,000 in interest, instead of having it tied up in a truck where it's actually getting to be worth less and less. So the waste, there's the 10 types of waste, and you're trying to get rid of waste wherever you can. And the companies that are the leanest and are proactive tend to do well in recessions, actually. Because you're going to pick up contracts where people fail. there's all kinds of opportunities that come out of this.
We want to take a break from today's episode to thank our sponsor, Cycle CPA. It's crucial to review your financial statements on a monthly basis so you can diagnose areas for improving your business's financial health early before they become significant issues. Too many contractors wait until the end of the year to review their financials as they file taxes, when it's often too late to take action to change the outcome. Cycle CPA not only handles bookkeeping and taxes, but they also ensure that you're armed with financial data on a monthly basis to make key business decisions. They offer benchmarking, cash flow forecasting, and assistance in developing targets for financial metrics. With their team of accountants specialized in the hardscape and landscape industry, they currently work with hundreds of companies in this field. Visit cyclecpa.com, and for $200 off, mention the How to Hardscape podcast. Now back to our episode. Going back to being proactive there, and where do you suggest somebody to start in that proactiveness? Is it the balance sheet and looking at the assets and seeing what is being utilized, what's not, and cutting? And then where do we kind of go from there? Where do you kind of suggest people start?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do is like anything that's lying around, get rid of it. So on the asset side, we also look at the people side, right? Now's a great time to download your unproductive workers or the ones that have attitude or are driving you crazy. And they might be great people that just don't fit your culture. This is an opportunity to trade talent, right? So sometimes less is more. People talk about growth. Well, growth can be more, or growth can be improvement. And improvement doesn't necessarily get measured by the number of trucks you have. It might be how profitable you are or how high your gross profits are. So I usually go to equipment first because that's the first way I can raise cash to pay for different things. And sometimes it might be buying a new piece of equipment actually that's more productive than something that you have right now that's unproductive. So there's another interesting word, which is the math, right? Like there's sort of a feeling type piece to what I'm doing, but there's also a mathematical model. Like what's the math that tells me this is a good move? And so one of the things we've been working in Knowledge Tree is creating systems that actually prove to you that the math is correct and that this is going to make you more money. Mm-hmm. We have emotional attachments to things. And I think that's one of the hardest things. There's a lot of passion in this industry, which is fantastic. You should be passionate about your wife, maybe, but not so much your Bobcat. You can get another one tomorrow. The first time ever we've had shortages in equipment was during COVID. It was an exception. I don't think that's going to happen again. Long-term trends, the US is onshoring all kinds of technology and manufacturing. So you will probably in 10 years never be subject to these supply chain issues again, because we're going to have trade that's going North America. So Mexico, Canada, the US, and that's on one continent. You can't have shipping problems. It's a much more straightforward relationship in terms of getting your equipment and materials that you need. So there's opportunity again in terms of the restructuring of the U.S. market and the Canadian market with onshoring, with the AI that's coming. Things are going to improve. I think we're going to hit a bit of a rough patch for a while. Hopefully, the government spends a little bit less than they take in, but that doesn't seem to be the case. But I see this as a great opportunity, what's coming down the pipe in terms of the change. And, it's kind of like if you're playing hockey and you have a bunch of lines and somebody gets on the ice at the wrong time or gets off the right time, at wrong time, you lose. This is that transition that's painful. Once you're on the ice, it's not so bad. So that's sort of what I see. The people side's a big one. You can upgrade, you can lean up, you can do a lot of things on the HR side. HR is harder than operations because you can just sell something and there's no emotion or less emotion tied to it. Growing is smart growth. It's about taking advantage of the opportunities that are there and setting yourself up for success. I think there's going to be some amalgamations where businesses actually come together. So, you've got this, I've got that, we're missing some things. So there's no reason why two businesses couldn't combine, for example, to take the best of both worlds. So again, it comes down to opportunity. So that's exciting actually, rather than sort of demoralizing.
For sure. Talking about if that opportunity arises for one of our listeners, where, hey, maybe it makes sense to join forces with a local company. You offer this, I offer this, we come together. You've been in a partnership for a long time. What do you look for, or what do you suggest somebody looks for when it comes to a partnership if they do decide to? Because I've heard partnerships are very, very difficult.
Yeah, so character, conscientiousness, so the person has to be work hard and be honest. Synergies, so there has to be overlapping synergies, overlapping strengths. So you don't want to have the same strengths, you want to have offsetting strengths. And it might be a necessity play. So sometimes the best things are forged under duress. And if you can't make it on your own, and somebody else can double down with you and get their hands dirty. I mean, I had a partner, and it's one of the reasons we survived all the recessions. We just put our heads down and didn't quit. On your own, it's a lot more difficult. Um, so yeah, you certainly want to have a great partner, but you also don't want to fold up because it's too difficult. So if you're still interested in having a business, I have an expression: the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So 1 + 1 to me can equal 3. That's a great marriage. That's a great business partnership. That's a great relationship with your customers. So it's a win-win-win. And so those opportunities are out there. And networking is a huge part of that. So we're having this smart growth event at Earthscapes facility, and in August, on August 25th, and they're in the business of buying businesses. And you can go there and learn a ton of things. How do they get to be so big? How are they growing? You can network with other businesses. There's so many different opportunities. And so one of the things I think is also important is that companies get out there and join their associations and meet with other companies and organize peer groups or join peer groups, or because you're going to learn an absolute ton. Sometimes one of the greatest things about networking with other people is you're going to learn a new supplier or a new software, or and it could be a lawyer, could be an accountant, whatever it is that's fantastic. On your own, you wouldn't know. So, if I said to you, Mike, how's your accountant? You happy with him?
A little bit.
Okay, a little bit. Okay. Well, if you would have said great, I'd want to know.
Yeah.
So, maybe I threw him under the bus. So, yeah. So now listen, if your taxes are too high, it's not his fault.
Right.
So make sure you take out your vengeance on
Yeah,
the right person.
for sure.
Um, and so again, these are opportunities to rethink the way you're doing things. And normally when things are going well, you just keep doing the same thing over and over. And but this forces you to change. So these are opportunities really. You either die or grow stronger.
Hmm.
And there's a bit of pain involved on the way for sure.
With your experience through these different downtrends in the market, and I'm sure you've seen businesses come and go in your time, is is there certain areas that you can point to and be like, we learned from them because they did this, and when we hit that downtrend, they went out of business or they dissolved or whatever it looked like, at different stages in business too, that startup stage, they hit a downtrend, they were out of business, to that larger company, and nobody thought they would have gone out of business and they went out of business. Are there any kind of trends that you picked up on that you guys were able to learn from throughout your years in business, or was it more so the practical, that you guys made a mistake, you fixed it yourselves because you learned from your own mistakes there?
So that's a great question. So I think there's the first thing is cash flow.
Hmm.
So who are you working for? So if you're working for that builder who has bad cash flow, you're going to have bad cash flow.
Right.
So we made some rules. We're not going to work for these people. Like no matter how exciting the opportunity is, we're just not going to do it. This is terrifying. In Canada, there are companies, what they do is they set up a new corporation every time they build a new home. So imagine they go bankrupt or the client's pissed off or whatever, there's some cat, you'll never see your money ever. And the legal channels are a disaster. So you better be it's better to sit at home and not recover your overhead than it is to work for somebody and then not get paid.
Yeah.
So saying no, as hard as it is to do, is very important. You better figure out who you're working for and whether they have the means to pay you. And if they have the means to pay you, do they have the intention to pay you? Because you got to remember, there's a lot of ruthless people out there, and they are just looking for victims. And or here's another good one. You have a B crew and you want to keep them busy. So you take on a job that you probably shouldn't, and then you don't get paid. So you might as well just have A crews and not have a B crew and figure out how to lean up to handle less revenue and get through the recession. And you'll come out the other side stronger. And there's going to be a lot of people that are laid off. So what happens is you've got these smaller companies and they may have some amazing people. And so bigger companies, let's say like ours, when we lay people off, you're not getting the cream of the crop. But the smaller companies, you are getting the cream of the crop. So then the bigger companies can then acquire the smaller company pieces, or you can have these amalgamations of companies, which can work really, really well. Yeah, so that's sort of the note on that one.
Do you guys hold on to capital in order to, an opportunity arises? Like, do you have a certain amount of capital set aside for these opportunities when they do come? Say a local company approaches you and says, George, we're for sale. What can you do? Do you guys have a percentage allocated to this just sitting there ready for an opportunity? Or is this something that you try to build up when that opportunity does arise and then pull the trigger on it?
But we always want to be liquid in case something happens, and then we can use our capital to invest in things. But there's different scenarios. So let's say I'm the opportunist. I'll put my opportunist hat on as Oriole Landscaping's. Well, I guess I was ex president, call it that. And some opportunity comes along. I'm not interested in the assets because I can just buy those anytime. So those mean nothing to me. I'm interested in the clients and I'm interested in the employees. That's it. And if there's no systems, the company really has no value. So then the question is, well, why would the person join the collective? And the answer is because they're going to get paid more than they did before. They're going to work less than they did before, right? And they're going to take care of their key employees, and there's less stress. And the reason for that is that we just have better systems. So everything just runs better. So that company is very inexpensive to buy. The company that I bought that has recurring revenue, that has great processes, I paid a premium for, but then I have nothing to fix. So generally, I like to buy pieces of businesses rather than the whole business, unless the thing runs amazing. So I don't want any damaged goods.
Right.
It's too much work to fix it. So again, those opportunities come. So we will be in a position, and it could be a trade. I might trade out one of my employees for a new person. So there's different ways to do it, and these different opportunities come up. So we will jump on any opportunity when it presents itself. Some of them cost money, some of them just cost time. Sometimes we use the other people's money to pay them. So I don't have to use my own money. I can use that company's profits to pay them, or give them percent of sales after we get through the year. So if their profit was 10%, I'll give them their profit back, and I'm not actually putting the money up front. So there's a lot of different ways you can structure things. The higher the value of your business, because it's actually something that's repeatable and has had flat to growing sales without a lot of volatility, then you start paying premiums, and then the actual valuation calculations change. It's a completely different animal. But those incredibly well-run businesses are far and few between. I would argue there's probably less than 1 in 1,000 businesses that are run really, really well. And that's why you see so few businesses being sold to venture capital and things like that. I think uh, yeah, I think I can say it now, so I know. Gelderman sold their business, a very large maintenance and design build construction firm out in the Hamilton Way. They just sold their business for, I suspect, a healthy sum. And they're an eight-figure business as well. So, but they had their systems and their processes and their branding and everything was running turnkey. So, unless you turn your business into a turnkey business, you'll never get a premium for it. So essentially, you're just working for yourself. Now, working for yourself is great if you're making more and working less. But if you're making more and working more, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to make more and work less. That should be the ultimate goal of a business person. And that doesn't happen on its own. That is slow and steady improvement. And you can position yourself to be recession proof, and provided that you don't take on some job where you're not going to get paid. I'll give you an example. We took on a job with a giant condo corporation. We bid the job in 2018. We wanted, it was, I don't know, $3 million. It was probably $1 million in change orders. And then COVID hit and we couldn't finish the job. Everything slowed down. So we just finished the job now and we're being paid our whatever $400,000 holdback, whatever, 5 years later. So like we had to carry that. And if so it also depends on the type of work that you do, right? So if you're in the commercial world, these recessions are way harder because the money slows down, the margins are low, the change orders take forever to get approved. There's people in your way. So there are locations that are going to do better in this recession. So people's summer homes, places like that, those places tend to do a lot better. People in Muskoka have money no matter what. And if you can afford that cottage, then you can always afford your home. So, the big lakes around Lake Joseph in Canada and Ontario, we've got this super wealthy area for cottagers. That is not going to do nearly as badly as some of the other smaller lakes where, the people don't have the deep pockets. So recessions aren't the same for everybody.
Right.
That's for sure.
In the past, how have you tried to get in front of that clientele? That clientele that's not going to do as bad during the recessions that you typically want to work for?
Yeah, so things have changed now. Essentially, what it is if you can get in with one good client and you do a great job, and slowly but surely you get the referrals, it takes time.
Mhm.
Social media is obviously very, very important. Like we have clients that say, "Oh my God, we loved your social media. We loved your Instagram pictures," and that's where they got the confidence to hire us from. So your portfolio, like it's death by a thousand cuts. Like your portfolio has to be awesome. That person with the money has to go, "Geez, I really want that. That's unique." I think you got to be unique as well. You can't be the same as everybody else.
Right.
I think that's another big deal as well. So it's yeah. So for some people, it's going to be too late. That's the beauty of recessions, is that it culls the herd, and then the ones that survive end up becoming better and stronger. So the trick is just to survive. How do I do that? So again, being proactive. It might be right now you're going to be reactive. Of course, I would be trying to sell assets. Certainly, shed some dead weight on the team, so to speak. And you're gonna have to do that regardless of whether like you're a bigger company or not. You're gonna have to lean up if you don't have as much volume. So, but the lesson is there's no better time than right now. If you think you can wait the market out to get more money for your trucks and things like that, too late. You should have done that a year or two ago. And so right now, it's if you need to raise cash, you have to sell some things at a discount. You can
Mhm.
sell everything. It just depends what the price is.
How important to you is it during the budgeting and forecasting process, maybe to start the year and as the year goes along, to think about, okay, what the economy is doing 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, and so on and so forth there? Does that even enter the budgeting, forecasting, what you're doing at the beginning of the year? Or is that something that as you proceed through the year, you get past the spring rush, and then you kind of adjust from there. How much does that kind of longer term forecast affect what you're doing when it comes to budgeting and forecasting at the beginning of the year?
Yeah. So for, let's say, next year's budget, which I'm not doing yet. So this year, I'll talk about Oriole, our landscaping business. Our sales are going to be the same pretty much as last year. The difference is the effort to get the work is higher, and the time between closings is longer.
Right.
So our pipeline is shorter. So that makes you nervous because, like, oh yeah, we got all this work, no big deal. It's like, well, we don't have all this work. We have all these opportunities, but we're not sure they're going to sign. So now it creates uncertainty. So you're better, like, that's why you want to lean up on everything you possibly can, figure out what your break even is, and then just dump everything possible that you don't need. So that if the next year comes and there's less work, you're ready for it, because it's you're being proactive. And if there's that much work, here's the good news. You can always subcontract another company to pick up the shortfall because they're all available.
Right.
Sometimes you get work because you're lucky, right? Like, here's an interesting concept for people. The difference between being busy and not busy is one job. We had a great year. Well, you landed that one extra job, and that if you didn't have that job, you're either break even or losing money. And in landscaping, you have to be at capacity. So you can't, like, take off 3 weeks and everything's gonna be fine. You've got to make this payroll, you got to keep these people on staff. The margins are low, so it's not like you're gonna carry people for 3 to 4 weeks while you have a lull till your next job comes. I would rather see you shed a crew and book out further than run out of work. And so I know companies that are doing that now. They're essentially shutting down crews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary. But if at least if you're going to get through it, it doesn't really matter at
Right.
the end of the day. Right? It's just about getting through. I think that should be the mindset. Lean and get through, and then network. And obviously, if there's any savings opportunities, for sure, you should always be looking for those, but especially now.
Mm-hmm. And as we kind of come to a close here, I've got, once again, tons of questions just coming up in my mind as you talk, which is always good. Uh, what about, I hear a lot of people talking about getting in front of that more luxury clientele, the clientele that, goes through a recession and they're totally fine. That seems to be
Yeah.
like very, very common. What about those smaller companies that may not be the best fit for those larger jobs, focusing in on the things that need to be fixed, kind of like how if there's a pipe in your house that's leaking, you need a plumber. It's got to happen. Same thing for us, for like a front step falling apart. That needs to be fixed. That has to be done. Have you seen in your experience, and even you guys at Oriole, marketing for those types of jobs when things start to dry up is a good way to go, because those are kind of necessities. That front step absolutely needs to be fixed. That backyard patio can be put off till next year or the year after.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So I have some smaller businesses that I consult, and one of the pieces of advice is they were running a little short on work. I said, I want you to drive down the street and then identify every house with a sunken spot in their driveway, a piece of coping that's falling off, a bush that needs to come out, whatever it is, and go and knock on the door, old school, and then quote right on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll pick up business. I mean, I started my business by knocking on doors,
Mm-hmm.
and it still works. I had a couple of kids come by my house, and they started a car detailing business. And they knocked on the door, and I'm thinking, yeah, I probably need yeah, sure, how much? Boom, done. And they did it on the spot. So, that's not social media. That's just old school grind the pavement, and it works. And then sometimes people go, oh, well, I've got this other thing that I want you to do. And then it grows. So I think the old door knocker and the like, literally knocking on doors, and this may mean stopping work. So I said to my guys, like, work until 4 o'clock on Friday because you got a shortage of work. Don't work Saturdays. That's another thing. Stop working Saturdays to ram the work through. That's a mistake. Slow it down. And then Friday afternoons between 4 and 6, or say 5 and 7, Go knock on doors. So I'll give you a quote for that. I saw this opportunity. Same thing on Saturdays. Saturday becomes an opportunity for you to drum up work. So you're literally going knocking on doors to get work, and it might be a 500 square foot relay. Well, I don't know, say it's $5 a square foot. That's $2,500. Boom, you just booked yourself a day, and maybe you've got some quotes that haven't closed yet. So sometimes it's not that you don't have enough work; it's the timing of the work doesn't align with when you need the work.
Yeah.
So if you can buy yourself some time on some little short-term work, and then that job comes in 2 weeks later, or that permit came in, or whatever it is, sometimes it's about buying time. And there's no shame in knocking on doors, and it works. It really, really does. So that would be my my other recommendation as well.
Perfect. George, is there anything that we did not touch on that you think would be valuable to our audience? We talked about economy, operations, people, opportunities. Anything that you think that we left out that you think might be a good closing statement, comment that you think would be helpful?
I think make do with what you have. Get rid of whatever you don't need. Like don't think you're going to change the world by all of a sudden buying some brand new trucks and all that stuff. Cash is king, and network, and keep grinding essentially, and do the simple things right. So collecting money is a big deal, because when you have great cash flow, and you have tons of work and somebody doesn't pay, no big deal. But when you have less work, you need the money even more. So get on top of the receivables. Go back to the phone to call people for money. That's also incredibly important. You won't be able to get away with what you did before, that's for sure.
Absolutely. George, once again, thank you so much for your time to pour into this podcast. I really appreciate it. And where can our audience go find out more about you, Smart Growth event? Where do you want to send them to? And all the links for our listeners will be in the show notes, so you'll also just be able to click them there as well.
Well, you'll be able to find the Smart Growth event on Eventbrite. And if you want to reach me, it's george@knowledgetreeconsulting.com. You can just send me an email, or you can go on our website, and I think I'm going to book a calendar invite if you want to talk. Maybe you live in interesting times, is a famous Chinese proverb.
Definitely. George, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. If you want to register for that Smart Growth event that we were just talking about there, that is the Smart Growth presented by Knowledge Tree Consulting and Earthscape on August 15th. And that's a full day event in Elmira, north of Kitchener. And you can send me a message at How to Hardscape. I will send you, if I still have them available. Like I said, I just have a limited handful of them. I will send you a promo code if they are still available. So send me that message quick if you want to get registered. After this podcast is live, I'm going to be sending out an email to our email list subscribers with the same thing. So take advantage of that for this less than 24 hours that you have by the time that this podcast episode does go live. Link will be in the show notes for more information on this event. And if you are looking for bookkeeping, accounting, CFO services, reach out to Cycle CPA at cyclecpa.com. Let them know How to Hardscape sent you for money off their services there. And if you want a software to dive into, the How to Hardscape Headquarters can help you budget, estimate job cost, time track, schedule, and manage your employees with so much more in the works for future features. Send me a message at How to Hardscape if you want to book a demo to learn more about that. And we look forward to meeting with you next week on the How to Hardscape podcast.